So I'm Ted Hope. I take it you're all filmmakers. Is there anyone here that's not a filmmaker? Please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. All right. 4. Great. This still works if you're not a filmmaker. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, tell you some things I've learned from being a filmmaker, tell you why I'm not doing it for my profession right now, and hopefully give you faith that you can find a way to have a great, productive, creative life, whether you're a filmmaker or not. So, and we have this beautiful presentation I put together, so feel free to let your eyes wander over there. I've had the pleasure of getting to make a whole lot of movies, 70 plus films. I've also, early on, and well, now it feels like early on, about 5 or 6 years ago, I also decided, for all the public speaking I can do, for all the panels and one-on-ones, I can't do enough to kind of help new filmmakers and other folks get their work made. So I started, oops, wrong way. Sorry, now it's going to go totally backwards. Sorry, folks. Okay, we'll get to the next. I wrote a book with the same title. It's lucky when you have a last name that you can use for such things as this. I always thought my dad must have, set me up somehow and changed his name so I wouldn't be Ted Gloom. But I checked the records. He's actually Ted Hope. So, so despite having been able to make a lot of movies and felt that I've been improving my craft all along, really feeling like I was at the top of my game in terms of skills and contacts and the money I could raise. Last year at this time, I wrote a blog post explaining that I wasn't going to be producing films for my living anymore. And that comes about because I think that there are kind of 3 cardinal rules in making movies, or really when you engage in any industrial creative, cultural practice, and that could be applied to that field. And for film, I think it comes down to 3 core things, right? Telling stories well, making sure that the work is seen widely by audiences, and making sure that your collaborators, your team members, your supporters, your backers, are all compensated fairly for the work that they do. I think all 3 of those things are all but impossible right now in the film business. And so, although I still, really live to make movies, I actually have a film that will start shooting next week, and I'm in post-production currently on my wife Vanessa's feature film debut as a director. And I think my best movies are still to come. I did take a hiatus from that project producing, and I'm currently the CEO of what I think is the greatest collection of cinema available anywhere. We have a streaming service akin to Netflix called Fandor. You might have read that we just brought the Criterion collection to the platform. So when I say it is the destination for the film buff, the film aficionado, the cineast, now I can actually, walk that walk in addition to talk that talk. And because you did me the courtesy of showing up, if you're so inclined, I will give you a free month subscription to it, and just put your name on this list, and I'll send you a note. You can start right here, even. It also
the current subscribers, does it?
Not yeah. You just don't luck out. But you know what you can do? I did bring stickers that have a 20% discount, and you can take 10 to make up for it to give to your friends. I'm gonna pass those out. That's basically my backstory, my setup. And since you are a subscriber, are you happy? Do you like what we have?
No.
Uh-oh, let's talk afterwards.
Oh, it's a little bit, maybe a little bit more obscure than maybe the difficulty in getting some titles.
You're making me sweat now. I'm gonna.
And I feel like I'm back at school because I have to make these comments. And if I'm tongue-tied, maybe I can get out of there before that feature pops up.
We'll talk afterwards. I like to think of that it's gloriously obscure, in that there's such a great collection of movies that we haven't been able to access, historically speaking, that I will never run out of great movies to watch, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But right now, what I did come here to talk about was the lessons that I've learned along the way, and I broke it out into 3 sections for you. So really, how to get a career going, how to do well with it, and then how to last. Those are the 3 topics I'm going to run through today, and I'll start out with starting out. So when I moved to New York City in the early 80s, all my clothes had holes in them, my hair stood up straight, I had hair. And I used to think of myself a bit as a punk rocker. I had the good luck of getting a job as a script reader for a company, New Line Cinema, on the day that their first hit film, Nightmare on Elm Street, came out. So I was their first reader. Not surprisingly, they gave me every single story about Sid and Nancy to read that there was. And the best one was a script called Love Kills. It was by Alex Cox and Abby Wool, and it was beautiful. It was a beautiful story. It became the movie Sid and Nancy. And I was in addition to being a script reader, I was a PA, a production assistant, a gopher. And I developed some good credits, but the one thing you couldn't say about me was that I was cool. I had glasses that were taped on the sides, I talked a little too fast, all of those things. But I wanted to get on this movie. And I had some friends that were cool, so they got hired, and they told me where the office was. And I would call up to, try to get an interview. I sent my resume in 5 or 6 times. I showed up at 4 o'clock when I knew it would be dead, gave them my resume, trying to get an interview. And they just said, thank you, we'll call you if we'll be needing anybody. I didn't know what to do. I had this friend Julia who, this was all pre-hair care product. So if you could make your hair stand up straight, you really had something, special going on. Her hair stood up just like those silhouettes on, Sid and Nancy do. She wore black eye makeup across her face in one flat line. She didn't wear any pants ever. And she got hired, and a guy named Joe Mama got hired. You had the director of Studio 54, the movie, he got hired. I didn't get hired. So what did I do? So I knew where the office was. I showed up at 7 a.m. one morning, bought 2 cups of coffee from the deli. I stood in front of the door till 7:30. They got cold, so I went back to the deli, bought another set of coffee. No one showed up. 8 o'clock finally, second, third set of coffee, this woman showed up, and she said, "Oh, hi, I'm Caroline." I said, "I'm Ted." She goes, "Are you here to work?" And I was like, "Absolutely." She opened the door. She said, "Well, come on in." And I said, "I'll just start by, I'll empty the trash, put new paper in the copier, I'll go get fresh milk for everyone's coffee brew pot. Don't worry about anything." She was like, "Great." Everyone has a superpower, right? Well, my superpower is I probably sweat more than 5 human beings put together. And people think it's a negative thing, but for me, it makes me look like I'm always the hardest working person in the room. Particularly if it's a room without windows, as that production office was. End of the day comes along, like I'm glistening gloriously, and they're like, "Ted, you work so hard. Is there anything we could do for you?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to talk to the production manager." "Why would you want to talk to the production manager?" "Because I'd like to get hired on this job." And they kind of had blank faces. And they said, "Don't worry, Ted, you're hired." So I got hired on that job. If you watch the film, if you've seen the film, when Gary Oldman ends up after falling down the stairs of the Chelsea Hotel and, you know, pulls himself together, that's the first time I ever got to call a roll or a cut on a set. You know, stuntmen fell down, Gary laid at the bottom, popped back up. You know, it meant a great deal to me. You'll see on that film, my credit is Theodore Hope. I didn't like how that looked, so subsequently every movie is Ted Hope. They were wonderful people to me, you know, brought me to the premiere at New York Film Festival. At the party, they said, Ted, you like that band, The Clash, right? Can I introduce you to Joe Strummer and Mick Jones, the lead singers of The Clash? You know, they really took care of me. It was really a thrill. And it was then that I kind of developed my first motto on, you know, how to succeed in the film business. You know, don't ask for permission. Now, my career didn't exactly take off after that. I worked on some incredibly well-known movies, right? Some films that left a lot to be desired. I was stuck in a horror film rut mostly. You know, I actually have an associate producer credit on that one called Doom Asylum. When I had quit, I actually produced that one with Patrick Swayze. I was 23 years old, and I quit the business because it was absolutely insane that my key grip was a junkie, right? The director and the DP threw chairs at each other. The producer locked the line producer, literally locked the line producer out of the office. You know, cars were rolled, fires started. It was absolutely insane. I felt like I was the only adult and I was the youngest person on the crew. I was like, you don't need, you know, any more producers in this business. You need to get drug counselors and, you know, family counselors and that sort of thing. And I quit. I learned that it took a little bit more than, you know, some first-hand experience to become a drug counselor. So my second career didn't take off. And then one day I got a call from some folks who said, Ted, we want you to come and produce this movie for us, production manage this movie. We have $100,000. We're going to shoot in a month. We don't have a script. We got a director. We don't have a cast. We don't have a location. But we have an excellent title, and we have to shoot in 4 weeks. It's called The Incredibly Insane Rituals of the Undead Leather Witches from Hell. And I thought for a minute, and I was like, okay, I'm in. I'm going to do it. I didn't have a job, right? $300 a week. It became Doom Asylum. I hid it from my resume for years until I realized if you look, you know, I don't know if you can quite see, but this cute young woman here is Kristen Davis from Sex and the City, and that was her first movie, and she had it on her resume, so I was like, if she's proud of it, I'm proud of it too. And the thing that was interesting then, like that, those were films, all those films really films that were bloomed because the world had changed, right? A new technology had come around, VHS. A new means of distribution had come about, video stores. And the industry wasn't ready for it. When they had licensed music to movies, they didn't have a phrase that if you've produced anything, you kind of know now that you license things for today's technology and any technology now known or forever after devised, right? They didn't have that. So most music that had been licensed in for classic movies couldn't be put on VHS, right? Until they cleared it separately, and that was a big bargain. So the companies developed just to stock the video store shelves. And those are really how these movies got made. It's how so much garbage got made for a while, and it gave birth to this wave of American independent films. And you know, I went there and I watched, and I tried to make sure that, you know, someone had told me, you know, you really have two jobs you owe yourself when you are a PA. One is to always be learning, and the second is always to be asking yourself, how can you do this better? How can you make it better? And I still apply those things. Anytime I look, I try to see, like, you know, you can tell professionals, right? Tape down cables here. Often that doesn't happen. You know it's an accident waiting to happen. You know, you see ways that people enter a building or leave a building. I'm always looking at it and say, How can I make that better? You know, same sort of thing with stories and movies, and we'll get into that part too. But those were the lessons, you know, horrible experiences, I have to say, working on most of those movies. But I feel like it made me the producer that I am. I finally got the opportunity to apply it to a film. I had a director that I worked with named Hal Hartley. I've made, I think, 10 films with him. One day, I was trying to produce him. Before I ever produced a movie, I failed, I think 9 times. But the nice thing about when you really fail as a producer, it means you don't get the movie made. Nobody sees that you failed. So I failed twice with Hal before we made his first film. And what happened was he got fed up with me. And one day he said, Ted, I want you to come meet me at Penn Station. If you buy my book, it will say Grand Central Station. And when Hal read it, he was furious at me. He said, you can't get to Long Island, to where I live in Lindenhurst, Long Island, from Grand Central Station, Ted. It was Penn Station. Anyway, so the coffee's kicking in, sorry. So I get on the train with Hal. I didn't know why he wanted me to go out to see where he grew up. I said, what's going on? He said, well, I wrote a script. I was like, when did you write a script? Oh, over the last 2 weeks, like literally. He handed it to me. I said, well, I'll budget this, I'll schedule this, I'll submit it for financing. We'll see if we can get this one going. He goes, no, Ted, we're not going to do it that way. You've been working on those movies like The Incredibly Insane Rituals and The Undead Leather Witches from Hell. You told me now that you can actually make a movie for $75,000, that you can make a film in 10 days. Well, we're going to make this one. He had gone to Citibank. Citibank then had these loans for these new inventions called home computers. And at that point, they would give you a loan for $15,000 for a home computer. And he went, he got his brother to go, he got his cousin to go, and he said, Ted, we're going to make this film for $45,000, right? And we're shooting in 4 weeks. Let's go. That was like our first scouting trip. It cost us $55,000 to get it in the can. It cost us $125,000 to complete it on film. We didn't know very much. When we got into our first film festival, the Toronto Film Festival, we let them screen it for press beforehand. Now you want to create a feeding frenzy, at a festival, and you hold it back, right? But as a result, when Hal entered his hotel in Toronto, this big man came barreling into him, just ran up, Hal Hartley, right? I'm a new distributor. I've got a company that's going to do really well. I want to buy your movie. We didn't know who he was. He introduced himself, Harvey Weinstein. I can't do him for things. So Harvey Weinstein, it's like his second film as a distributor. He paid us $250,000 for that film. We had no contracts with our cast or our crew or anything. We distributed the profits amongst people. So everyone that worked on that film got at least a union wage, if not more, from it. And the great thing that happened with that is that when Hal took this film to the Sundance Film Festival, then the USA Film Festival, and another guy came up to him and said, hey, I'll give you $700,000 to make your second film. Hal called me, I wasn't up there, in January and said, we want to start pre-production on January 30th. We didn't have cash flow for that film until about April 14th, a week before we shot. The movie was called Trust, but we just hired the exact same crew from The Unbelievable Truth, and because we had gave them all, like a 5-figure check, actually they got their checks on December 24th that year. It was a nice gift. They all came back and worked with us, and in trying to figure out, I'd been hoping to be mentored. I'd been hoping for a known producer to come find me. When all that started, kicking in for me, I decided, okay, here's a new motto, a new way to live, to get my producing career going. I'm going to make sure that I create my own opportunities. I'm not going to wait for those things to happen. Okay, so that's how I got my career going. How do you make it work, right? How do you make it work both in terms of what you create and the money you make? I think my biggest learning experience, I'm a pacer. I'm like so much wanting to walk away from the mic. Will you hear me if I but you won't pick up the sound. Okay. So, you know, I'll just wait. So, all together. So actually, I think like the greatest gift that I've got in my career was failing. Right? What was having a movie that nobody else wanted, making one. I had the opportunity to work with a director whose first film I really loved, although it didn't get any release in the United States. It did okay internationally. We decided to make a second film with him. We wanted to make it for $1.5 million. We couldn't raise it. We raised the money for that movie by raising it the way we usually raised our money in those days, by cutting the budget in half and then cutting it some more. So we made it for $700,000. It required us to be a little more innovative. It was the first film cut on an Avid. For those that are filmmakers, I imagine you're using Final Cut Pro. In those days, everyone used Avids. They measured the resolution on an Avid by calling it AVR, audio visual resolution, and then a number, and they stopped at 97. If you had started using one when I did, you would have been on AVR 3, right? Which means that the pixels were about the size of ping pong balls, right? So it was the first time we ever did a matchback from video to film. We didn't know what we were doing. It took longer. The day it got out of the lab, we had to literally, without watching the print, just ship it off to the Berlin Film Festival. It got in. I thought, wow, I never had a film in the Berlin Film Festival. I shipped it off to the sales agents I had worked with in the past. They looked at it and they said, Ted, you made a terrible mistake. You made this film that is entirely unsellable. It is gay, it is Chinese, and it feels like a film from the 1940s, except it's gay and Chinese, right? You know, it's not going to work. The film was called The Wedding Banquet. The first time I got to see it on the screen was at the press screening, and all I saw was the 8 out-of-focus shots that those big pixels, you know, led us to have. You know, I'm like, I'm not going to be invited back. They're going to throw tomatoes at me when the film ends. Like, I was looking for the exits. Like, my plan was, like, when the movie ends, I'm going to just race to the exit as fast as I can. Instead, when it ended, everybody not just stood up, they climbed on their chairs, right? I've never seen this since, but maybe it's a tradition in Berlin. But we had a standing chair, standing on your chair, standing ovation for the film. It went on to win the Golden Bear at the Berlin Film Festival, the grand prize of the festival. And in the next week, my business partner and I, James Seamus, sold the film ourselves. That $700,000 film did $3 million in territorial licensing over that next week. We took a 10% fee, which is 3 times less than what normally was charged. So we delivered back to investors another $600,000. We went right away with his next film, Eat, Drink, Man, Woman. Because we didn't know what we were doing, we actually had the gall to say, no, we don't like that idea of a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year license. How about 6 years? Right? We were able to do a 6-year license on that film. We licensed the film for a second term after 6 years for the same amount that we did for the first term. To this date, it's still, I think, like number 8 all-time ROI on films. We did a 47 times return for our investors. Now, granted, that year, the film that did number 2, 1% of its profits exceeded 100% of our profits. It was a little movie called Jurassic Park, slightly different. But what I learned there was that art, artists, technology, the audiences, all change much faster than the business practices. You know, that we get stuck in these legacy practices that make us think it's a way to do business, but sometimes there's a better model that's more applicable for the world we're living in today. What was really key for me, though, too, on top of that, was when I was getting totally enthused about what we were doing, when I realized we were making a lot of money, I started consulting with different sales agents. And I met a young guy who was the junior person at Harvey Weinstein's company. And I thought he was brilliant. His name was David Lindy. I proposed to him that he'd come be our third partner at the company. He laughed. And I kept doing it for another 2 years before he finally said yes. He came and joined our company. Using that model, using the lessons that we learned at Berlin, we went on to make 45 films that we financed ourselves without having a penny of capital. We did not have any money ourselves. Half of those films, almost half, 22 of them, we owned outright. We were able to sell that company eventually to Universal, which David Lindy went on to become the head of. So the opportunities are frequently out there. And as much as they're out there, though, I think that film also shows me the lessons of how many times they're overlooked for the wrong reasons. That film was directed by Ang Lee, which I would say is not just one of Taiwan's national treasures, but one of our national treasures. I got to make 5 movies with him. My company made 3 others. Despite what people say about one of them, I think they're all quite good. I'll let you be I'll let you decide for yourself which one I'm referring to there, but it's the one in the bottom left-hand corner. The interesting thing was, I saw Ang Lee's student films when I was in college, right? He made some great movies. He won the Student Academy Award. When I proposed to my business partner, James Shamus, that we start a company called Good Machine, I had a list of directors. On that list, top of the list was Ang Lee. Kelly Reichardt was on that list, Phil Morrison, Jem Cohen, Mark Friedberg, who became Ang's production designer, Nicole Hollowcenter. There were folks that I had already spotted that I wanted to work with. Ang spent 8 years not getting movies made, You could spot who he was. Like, discovering those folks wasn't hard, right? They're diamonds. They shine brighter. They just haven't yet been kind of cut to give the full-on glow, but he couldn't get his career going. Some of that had to do with who he was at that time. Now when you hear him talk, accepting Oscars and so on, he's a profoundly articulate, soulful guy. But in the beginning, he had trouble explaining what he wanted. There's the second chapter in the book is about working with Ang, and I start by talking about that phrase, let me take a moment to think about it. Ang doesn't just take a moment. He sometimes will take 6 hours or a day or 2 weeks and then come back to it like that conversation is still going, right? So like you'd be talking about something, he'll nod, you go off and have lunch, you come back, and he'll say, yes, 7. And you'd be, excuse me? 7, I need 7 horses in that scene, and you're like, when were we talking about that? And in the beginning, I thought, like, there's something wrong with this guy, right? But what I came to learn was he actually held the whole movie in his head. He would say things like, oh, no, I can't have her pick it up with the right hand. And you'd be like, why? Because in the final scene of the movie, they're going to do it with the left hand, right? And, like, he's already holding that information. That's a lot of responsibility. And on top of that, he would have frequently planning what he wanted to do for his next movie with the movie that he was making. So he wanted to do a big studio spectacle. He knew he had to learn how to do action sequences, and he would build little pieces to build upon in each of those movies. So he said, it will get better, I promise. Ang also, when you're in film school, when they try to tell you what makes a good director, they usually start with saying, you want to find somebody who's decisive, who makes up their mind no matter what. Ang is not a decisive fellow. On Wedding Banquet, there was a moment where we're about ready to shoot a big scene that we've spent all this time, setting up for. And Ang is, you look at him and he's just like miserable, like about to cry or like commit suicide or something. And it's like, Ang, what's the matter? He goes, it's all good. It's like, Ang, I can tell you're upset. It's clear. No, everything's fine. Is something not right? It's all good. Can you tell me, is anything wrong? Nothing is wrong. You look around and you see him staring at like the lead actress, frowning. It's like, is there something wrong with our actress? Nothing's wrong with the actress. Is it her wardrobe? Do you not like her wardrobe? I like her wardrobe. Do you like her brown dress, Ang? Yes, I like her brown dress. You kind of remember, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember he was really frustrated between the brown dress and the blue dress. did you like the blue dress more? Yes, I liked the blue dress more. And it's like, Jesus, you know, you know, if you had bought into that idea that like the first quality of directing is decisiveness, I would never have made a second film with him. You know, if you looked at somebody who was grounded and not what, you know, would feel like, you know, someone that lived in their own headspace, I couldn't have worked with him. And you know, he is such a great director. And it taught me that really there are no templates when it comes to either art or artists, to working relationships. Each filmmaker you work with is a custom fit. You have to be willing to throw out those lessons and kind of build it again if you want to bring out their most unique attributes. And I wouldn't have learned that without Mr. Lee. Oh, I didn't get that last thing. There you go. Sorry, one click away. So, you know, to me, you know, it was my relationship with Aang that really kind of taught me how to lift it up and find ways to do business. But it's all fine and good to get started. Really, the question is, how do you last, right? So that's what we'll touch with now. So we had a small production company that after we made Wedding Banquet, we could keep the doors open. We had 2 employees, Mary Jane Skalski, who's since gone on to produce the films of Tom McCarthy, like The Visitor, Station Agent, new film, The Cobbler, and Anthony Bregman, who's went on to produce movies like Eternal Sunshine. They were just office staff for us at the time. And Mary Jane was single, which is important, because one day she got all excited and she said, Ted, I need you to watch this video. I was like, why? Well, this incredibly cute guy came in. He talks even funnier than you do. And he asked me if we would consider his movie. I said, oh, I was like, I don't really, please, Dad, he won't come back unless you watch it. So I said, okay, I'll watch it. Curious enough, like that, while I was leaving the office that day, Tom Rothman, who now runs Columbia TriStar and had bought the Wedding Banquet for North America, called me and said, have you ever heard of this guy named Eddie Burns? And I was like, well, Mary Jane just gave me a videotape that he made, but I have never heard of him. He goes, well, he has a friend here. If you are interested in the movie, I'll consider paying for a first look on the finished film. Eddie had made this movie called The Brothers McMullen. It was a 2.5-hour-long drama, right? That was filled with scenes with like literally people playing chess by themselves, drinking whiskey by themselves, running their hair through their hands, just fretting in frame. He had submitted it to every festival and every distributor. If you go to his office, he'll have a big frame filled with over 100 letters of rejection, right? I looked at the movie and I saw something else there. I thought it was really funny if you could just cut through the crap, right? And I told Eddie that. Now, Eddie was, at that point, living in his car. He was a PA on Entertainment Tonight, and he was working on his movie at night. We spent the next 2 weeks together in the edit room, and very quickly he realized, wait a second, you mean I don't have to have the person walk out of the room at the end of the scene when they finish the line? You know, like, it's better to leave on the kiss, you mean? Like that sort of stuff. In 2 weeks, he cut about almost an hour out of that movie, and he turned it into a comedy. I just realized that, you know, I lost something on that slide, sorry. That process, you know, really taught me that you have to, you know, be willing to keep on pushing, to find that thing, to lift your movie up. We took it to Sundance. It won the Grand Jury Prize, which is what's missing. Just imagine laurel leaves right there. Grand Jury Prize winner. It won Sundance. On top of that, we had a good fortune again of having things go wrong. I'd helped Eddie get a great lawyer, John Sloss, noted deal maker, and we talked about what the strategy was for the film. John, however, went skiing in the afternoon with his brother, and his brother broke his leg. His own leg, that is. And John had to go to the hospital with him. So when Tom Rothman saw the film when it screened for the first time and decided he was going to exercise his first look to make a bid, I was the one that had to negotiate the deal. I didn't sell it for as much as John Sloss would have, but I did push for something called back-end bumps, right? I had known Tom, he had distributed our films, and now he was running a new company called Fox Searchlight. It was their first film. And I knew he would have to, you know, push the brand, have to show what they could do as well as just push our movie. We got bumps for every $1 million of box office, right? The film did $11 million at the box office. Suffice it to say, Eddie and his family made a fortune on that movie, and it allowed him to keep doing what he does today, which is make movies his way, right? He found success, he's married to a supermodel, all those things. But the fact is, if you follow him on Twitter, if you've ever heard him speak, he's an incredibly grounded, level-headed guy that recognizes that it was just really a hair. Like, his life went a different way. Everyone had passed. It was really just that good fortune that gave him the gift of his life now. And he still totally is devoted to the guys that he grew up with, his family. He's the first person on set to know everyone's name. And he was able to say, wait a second, I don't want to live a life that takes 5 years for somebody to pass judgment on my script to say they want to make it. I want to find a way that allows me to keep making movies for my audience as fast as I can. And Eddie turns out movies now, you know, literally, you know, every year and a half. He makes them for about 150 grand. You know, he has a team of people who work on deferred but end up making a lot because they have a model that works. And, you know, he remains an inspiration to me today. That story of triumphing over adversity, sometimes seems the opposite of this movie that I made. It is the, it was the second lowest budgeted film to get nominated for a Best Picture Oscar until 2 years ago. The film that was the lowest actually won. That was Chariots of Fire. The film that now actually can say it was the second lowest was Beasts of the Southern Wild. But for that while, this film that we initially made for $2.7 million was number 2. Now, we made this film and we brought it to Sundance, which is where we sold it to Harvey Weinstein. You start to see like there's a theme, at least some constant group of characters that run through this tale. But it had been a really tough and brutal process. If you buy the book and you read it, you'll hear how, like, in the height of it, the director, incredibly gifted guy, Todd Field, quit. Like, it was too intense for him. And I would say this man has, nerves of steel. He has strength and passion stronger than most folks that I've ever encountered in life, and he quit. He also stayed throughout the movie too, and and that's kind of what this is a bit about. The film was 2 hours and 22 minutes long when Todd thought he was finished with the film, and our investors were freaking out. There's no way we're going to be able to sell this movie. Todd agreed to sit with me and go through each cut of the movie and weigh it, shot by shot. What, did it work or did it not work? By the end of that process, we both knew that we really had the best movie possible with the footage that we shot. That's the cut we brought to Sundance. Now, at Sundance, we actually realized we were wrong, and there was another 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes that we could cut out of the film. When Harvey bought it, he signed a deal that said that I, Ted, would have the final cut on the film. I told Todd, you know, Harvey's got it, and you got to recognize what that means, right? They have a corporate culture where they will do their own version of the movie. But you and I know that this is the best version, and Harvey loves movies, and we will triumph. So Harvey looked at the movie. He said, well, Ted, I know you have Final Cut, but I think we probably can do it a little bit better. Can Todd work with my editor and try to cut a new version that takes 22 minutes out of the film? Todd will do it, Harvey, but we don't think there's a better version, but we'll do it. So they worked together, they cut it, and they tested our cut against their cut, right? And our cut won. And Harvey came back to us and said, I know exactly what you did here. You deliberately made a bad edit of the movie so it wouldn't work, right? I'm going to take the movie away from you for a couple months. I'm going to do my own cut with my editors, and we'll have a movie that will really work and maybe get some Oscars. We let him do it, come back. It's now like June, end of June. Test it. It does even worse than his first cut. It does like pitiful. And he's like, there's a good movie in here. I don't know what it is. I don't know what game you guys are playing, but like we can't release this film this way. Time is ticking. Todd Field was a professional actor, right? He stopped taking jobs because he felt he needed to police his movie. We weren't getting any headway. Nothing was happening. Finally, in August, we get a phone call. It's like, Ted, Todd lives in LA, right? Yeah. Damn. Why? Why? Well, Harvey's going to have dinner tomorrow night at the Mercer Hotel in New York, and we think like that would be a good place for Todd to confront Harvey because he's going to be in front of Marty Scorsese. You know, they're working on this movie, Gangs of New York, and you know, we think that that might be a chance to get this film back. Todd will be there. So Todd hops on a plane. This is, I think, also like the week that they finally figured out why his stomach hurt so much, that he had developed a bleeding ulcer, right? This is what I mean, like this guy is like devoting everything to police his movie. So he walks into the, he's an actor, so he walks into the Mercer Hotel kind of nonchalant. Harvey, Todd, Harvey, Todd, meet my friend Marty. Oh, hi, Mr. Scorsese. Todd, sit down, thanks. Hey, Harvey, how do I finish my movie? You gonna let me cut my movie? You gonna let me get the movie out? What can I do? Whoa, Todd, back off. Look, here's the deal. And it doesn't matter if whether you agree with this or not, this is what we'll do. We'll screen the movie for Marty here, right? We'll screen it for Marty, and if he likes it, well, maybe not if he likes it, but we'll screen it for him, and if he finds things to cut out of it, we'll cut that out of the movie. And if he likes it, we'll still probably make those cuts too. But we'll, you know, we'll screen it for Marty and we'll see what he has to say. Okay? Okay, Harvey, we'll do that. So I'm kind of thrilled because I get that report and I get to call the edit room. I talked to Thelma Schumacher, Marty's editor, the day after they screened. Yeah, we saw it. We love the movie. It's beautiful. It's a little long. There might be some things we can do for it. Call me back tomorrow. Great. Call him back. The phone just rings and rings. Finally pick up. Hi, so it's Ted. Ted, we can't talk to you right now. Call back. Call back. Wait a few days, call back. Ted, we're not going to talk about this. It's done. Nothing. Yeah, it's like, excuse me? It's like, that's it. You know, I wasn't going to fight on the phone. I don't know what to do. Another month goes by. Finally, the phone rings. Harvey says, tomorrow, I want you and Todd and the other guys in the film to come to my office. Click, hangs up. Todd, you got to come back from California. You got to come to New York. We're going to go see Harvey tomorrow. I think it's finally like the resolution. We go into the room, and there's a stack of video players and monitors on one side, and a stack of video players and monitors on the other. Harvey says, we're going to compare your cut against my cut, shot by shot. And whatever's best, that's what we're going to stay with, and we'll be done with it. Okay? Okay. So we started going, like on the second cut, I'm like, Harvey, I'm sorry, but that was really an inelegant cut that you made there. It's not at all flattering to Marissa, the actress. You know, shut the fuck up, Hope. Right? He let me talk in another 20 minutes, but we go through this whole process. And at the end of it, Harvey says, you know what? You're right. Your cut is better. Just cut 2.5 minutes out of the film, and I'll release it. We had 2.5 minutes in Sundance. It was now the end of August, right? In the bedroom was the first film, evidently, since one of Stanley Kubrick's, that a first feature got the National Board of Review for Best Director, right? So all of a sudden, this film that Harvey didn't think too much about was getting critical acclaim. He was chasing his 11th Best Picture nomination in a row. And the films that he thought he would have, Gangs of New York, weren't ready. The film he had, The Shipping News, wasn't getting any good reviews. His backup contender, Amélie, was French and most likely wouldn't get a Best Picture nomination. He had one horse left in the stable, right? He spent $20 million bringing that film to a $32 million box office and getting 5 Oscar nominations in the process. He needed to win. That was a good piece, of our success. But it often takes even more to have success. Our film came out in November of the year 2000. And in 9/11, something else occurred. The reason that Todd and I wanted to make In the Bedroom is we both had experienced certain things in our lives that led us to want to make a movie that really captured the weight of grief. Right? This is a movie where a man's son is killed, and the killer is not prosecuted for it. And the weight of the grief, the reminder that they lost their son, leads him to take action, really it's partially at the request of his wife, Sissy Spacek. He was a doctor, and to take another man's life is complete antithetical to everything that he had been taught. We thought we made this movie that captured the weight of loss in an incredible way. But that wasn't the movie that anyone saw, right? Because it came out in November. When audience said what they liked, they said, I love that that motherfucker took that man's life and got vengeance for what was, he wrongly shouldn't have experienced. They loved almost the exact opposite of what we made. And we know, because everyone saw the film beforehand, before those events, that we had succeeded in what we wanted to communicate. But the audience saw something else, and that's why it was able to have enough success to really resonate with the audience. So as much as you think you make a beautiful movie, you make something glorious that people are going to respond to, sometimes it's going to be overlooked. Sometimes it's going to require things to go horribly wrong in a different direction for it to find its audience in a way that really resonates with them. And sometimes it's going to require somebody else's ego to be chasing other things than what you're trying to do to get all that momentum needed to have it happen. Good work is not enough to succeed, unfortunately. Now, it's not all such a bummer, right? Now, I made this other movie. It also should have a set of laurel leaves over here saying Grand Jury Prize winner at Sundance. I won it 3 times. This film, I read a little while ago that Darren Aronofsky, when he graduated college, had 5 ideas for movies that he wanted to make. One was a horror film about a ballet dancer. One was the movie Pi. One was Hubert Selby's novel about drug addiction. I can't remember what it's called. Requiem for a Dream. One was Noah. And there was another one. Right? So he had 5 films that he wanted to make, and he's made them all. I had one film I wanted to make when I was in film school, and it was American Splendor. And I really never thought I would get to make this film. I had on the Ice Storm, our receptionist was a cartoonist, a guy named Dean Haspiel, and we bonded over our love of Harvey Picart's comics. If you haven't ever read them, they're really such a unique thing. He was a hospital clerk in Cleveland, and for whatever reason, he decided he was going to write his autobiography, but he wasn't going to do it in a traditional form. He was going to do it as a comic book, and he couldn't draw. Luckily, he could find people that could draw it for him. I was incredibly moved by his work. Like he struggles with, manic depressive. He, always has money issues. He just can't keep his life together. There were things in that book that I either knew from my life or my friend's life, and sometimes it even helped guide me, in giving good advice to people to get through certain things. And he was funny, right? And he was incredibly passionate about the things he loved, mainly jazz music. The rights were always taken. I inquired a few times about it. But then one day, or one night, one evening, like 9:30 at night, I'm changing my son's diapers, and the phone rings, and there's a woman on the phone, and the first thing she says to me is, "I hear you're interested in my husband." Right? And I was like, "Excuse me?" Now, if you've read Harvey's books, you'll, one of the stories he tells is the first time he meets Joyce, the first thing he says to her is, "I want you to know that I've had a vasectomy." They hadn't even met yet. Like the very first time he says it, like that was his opening line. So this is the kind of couple that's made for each other, right? And she tells me that the rights had lapsed, and she had heard from Dean, who went on to draw some of Harvey's comics, that I was a big fan, and did I want to option it? And I optioned it on the spot with that night. It took me about 5 years to make this movie. We ended up making it actually, right after 9/11 that year. We went up and we shot it and made it on a tight budget. We used all of Harvey's furniture in the movie, and Harvey's in the movie, if you haven't seen it himself, too. It was Paul Giamatti's first leading role, but it's half documentary, half fiction. But because we were using Harvey's stuff, like at lunchtime, Harvey would come and sleep on set because it was the couch that he always slept on, and he just couldn't sleep unless he could sleep on that couch. He had a great time when we were filming the movie. He had just decided that since the movie was happening, he was going to retire. And if you've read his comics, you know this is like a huge thing for him. His job was his stability in life. But the movie replaced that. And he would take all the crew out, record shopping, book shopping. He had tons of friendships. When we left town, that part of his life disappeared. During that period between that and Sundance, he attempted suicide twice. When I first screened the movie for him, it was just in my office, and I was like, Harvey, like I was really pleased with what we had. Nobody had seen it. He was the first, he watched it. I was like, Harvey, what do you think of the movie? He was like, it's okay. You think anyone will like it? I was like, really? That's what you feel? Like, this is your story. I hope someone likes it, right? That was like the response, and he just kind of walked away. So the next time he sees it, it's at Sundance. It so happened he got to sit next to Al Gore. I'm sure that was a nice feeling. But the crowd loved the movie. It won the grand jury prize. Just big, big standing out. They didn't stand on their chairs, but they really loved the movie. And I was up on stage, when everybody was clapping. I'm looking at Harvey, and his health wasn't great then, and I just watched this guy that was kind of hunched over, like start to stand up straight, grow like another 6 inches. I watched 15 years fall off of this man's shoulders. Like his life changed. He went on to write 5 more books. He got to travel the world. He had never been out of the United States before. And I could see in him, but then also in how people talked to me about the movie, that this movie changed his life, and really had a great impact on folks feeling that everyday, ordinary life is something extraordinary. And to me, it's one of the things that gives me so much hope about the era we're living in right now, right? That, up until recently, there was only really 2 things you could do with film, right? You can make money for it, and you could entertain people. And that was enough to make it go well for 125 years, right? That, we didn't build other businesses off it too much, right? Yeah, okay, so you take a 15-cent bag of popcorn and you upsell it for $6, maybe that's a good business. But film has incredibly unique attributes, right? there is no other product that I know of that can make you have a common emotional response, share it with strangers in the dark, legally, right? You know, that there's nothing else that compels you to talk about it afterwards with passion and feeling, that helps you understand people that are incredibly different from yourself, to build that empathy, you know, across great divides of difference, right? And we haven't been able to unlock that, really, because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have a way to combine consumption with community, to be able to transfer that exchange. I kind of think it's a magic formula, the way we take leisure time, convert it to intellectual capital when we see the movie, and then convert that to social capital when we talk about it. That triangle, to me, is a magic formula that speaks of the utility of cinema, the way it works as a transformative power to change people's lives and change society. And I don't think we've ever been in a position until now, really, that would allow that to happen. These are the last 5 films that I produced myself. They were all made in a manner that I refer to as often budget agnostic. They both launched people's careers and kept their careers going. Because that one in the middle, I take full responsibility for $750 million of global box office this year. That director, James Gunn, got to show exactly what a James Gunn film was, which was a bit of, holy motherfuck, what the heck is that? Really a insane little movie called Super that Marvel Comics saw and said, you know what? We're looking for a director for Guardians of the Galaxy. James Gunn, that's the guy to do it. But they were all a struggle, you know, because the budgets were changing, the responsibilities were growing, the means of distribution were going. I got to experiment in a lot of ways, but it really, to me, defines, really, if you want to understand the film business today, this, to me, is the main takeaway. People speak of William Goldman's, in film, no one knows anything. But I think people know a tremendous amount. But the fact is that field that they're standing on is constantly changing, constantly shifting. Now, you can complain about it, or you can use it for your advantage. And I think the fact that right now, really, everyone's at the same starting point is an incredibly great gift. Okay, I'm running out, so I want to talk to you about something that, to me, is one of the key things. I had nothing to do with any of those movies. I liked how that went, so I'm going to do that again. But these are some of my favorite films. And one of the most surprising things I find about folks who want to be creative or who want to make movies is they just think they should just jump in and go ahead and do that. And I think that's a good way to get started. But if you want to have a sustainable career, if you want to endure, I encourage you to try to think hard and start to define what it is that you really love about movies. I had the good fortune of meeting the woman I wanted to marry, excuse me, and having her turn me down. I met Vanessa Hope. She wasn't always called Vanessa Hope. About 3 months before I was asked to be on the Sundance Grand Jury. And right before that, we started dating. And I was like, come to Sundance with me. And she goes, what, are you kidding me? Like, we've been dating for 2 weeks. I'm not going to Sundance with you. Who do you think I am? So every night I would call her on the phone. Sorry. Every night I would call her on the phone and talk about what it meant to be on the jury. And I was on the jury with really great actors, great directors, great cinematographers. And one of the things that struck me was none of these people had yet defined what it was that made a film great for them. We would talk about it, I like this film, but I was like, we don't have a common language. We have to know what it is that we love. So over that course of those nightly phone calls, I started, for me, defining what I loved. It took over 2.5 years to really answer that question. I had a lot on my list. Luckily, it was a good way to start a relationship and keep it going. In case you want to answer that for yourself, I put it down on a piece of paper for you. But these are my qualities of better film. You should find the same ones for yourself. I wrote blog posts on each and every one of those, so that you can go to that link that's on it, and it's on that sheet of paper too, and understand a little bit more of what I mean. But for me, having this defined almost became a mantra for me. So like when I was working on a script and I didn't know why it wasn't working, I would look back on this list. You know, when I was on set and I didn't feel the scene coming together, I would think through this list. Same thing in post-production, same thing when I see a movie, you know. But this, again, is my list. You know, I had the pleasure of being on a jury with Vimo Zsigmond, the cinematographer of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and so many other movies. And we were going back and forth. They would always ask me, like, why did you like this movie? And they're like, Dad, you're getting so political. And like, what is it that you like about movies so much? And I was like, originality and ambition. I like to see someone do it fresh, and I like to see somebody reach high. And Vimo's staring at me like he was like, I was like, what? He goes, bullshit. That's absolute bullshit. I'll tell you what a good movie is. A good movie is a smooth dolly move and natural lighting. That's it. So you can define it in your own way, but I do think it makes sense to define it. Those are my lessons, but I have, because I like you guys, I have one special bonus, you know. The film industry, like many other industries, is populated by a very specific breed of people. It's filled with egotists, narcissists, misanthropes, liars, cheats, and thieves, right? It's not a nice place to dwell. And you have to ask yourself, how am I going to survive in this industry? How am I going to be surrounded by these people, right? And I think that is the question that's really at the core of everything, the most important thing. You have to ask yourself, how are you going to feel better about what you create and the people that surround you 20 years down the road than you do today? I can tell you, I have more enthusiasm, I have more faith, more hope for film today than I've ever had before. And it really comes down to those things of asking yourself, what matters most for you? How do you make sure that you're not going to feel badly about those choices that you've made before? I think I answered that question in the lessons that I went through, but maybe there's more to say. But if you have questions, now is the time to ask them. Do not ask a question unless you're holding a mic. Our friend here has that very tool in his hands, so he's going to hand it. Now, while you figure out the questions that you want to ask, I have one other thing that I'll share. I'm a chronic list keeper, right? And I find it such a useful way for me to kind of think about the things that I feel. And about 2 years ago, I was in the shower, and I had one of those eureka moments where I realized that I had already figured out my to-watch list now had reached such a size that I actually didn't need any more movies for 10 years past my life expectancy rate, right? Till I would turn 84, if I was able to maintain my maximum rate of consumption of about 250 titles a year, I was totally set. And they all were filmmakers with names like Fritz Lang, or Akira Kurosawa, you know, like great directors. They all had 4 or 5 stars. And my first response was like, I don't need anyone to make any more movies, right? You know, but I would say I need you guys who are the filmmakers to make movies, right? Because you have one core thing that those guys don't have, right? You're not dead, right? But that's profoundly important because it means that you're able to make movies about the world that we live in, right? And if that's going to be your competitive advantage, that's really what you want to think about. What is the world that we're living in? And of course, being who I am, I made a list about that, right? You know, I think there are a series of factors about the business, the culture, that you have to think about that are profoundly different than they were certainly 125 years ago when the film industry got started, but even 10 years ago or 5 years ago, and certainly 20 years ago when I got started. And I wrote them down on a list, and I put staples on them so you could have the entire 50 things. And they also have a coupon on the back to get another discount off of Fandor if you want them. But you can pass those out. And now maybe there's a question. Anyone have any questions? There we go.
Hi.
Introduce yourself, too.
I'm Casey Brown. My partner Brandon and I co-wrote and directed our first feature that's here. I guess called Gone Doggy Gone. It's a comedy about a couple who treats their dog like a baby and then it gets kidnapped. But the question I guess I have is because we're on the verge of beginning another feature, and we got distribution for our feature, but it's very hard when you don't have any stars, which we don't because we all come from improv. But they're good actors. We have good actors in our film, and we've done well with that. And the question is there any hope for filmmakers to continue in that vein by not having to get that star and still maybe somehow monetarily come out even? Because I mean, of course, everyone for our next one's like, get a star this time, because then, you know, bigger distributors will want you. But as we know, it's all just it's a really difficult place right now for indie film for everyone. So I guess that's my question. Is there hope for like Duplass Brothers and people like that, you know?
Well, you just answered your question, right? That they demonstrated that very much that there is.
But any more?
What?
Like, is there now, though? Because it seems different.
Well, I think, you know, and on those lists, like where I think it all starts is the film business historically has been based on scarcity of content, right? That when I first started making movies, about 250 films were released theatrically in the United States, right? 800 films will be released in New York City alone this year, right? 50,000 feature films are generated on a global basis, right? 50,000 films generated annually, right? So that math basically means that America, the top consumption market still for film, is able to handle theatrically about 1.5% of the global supply, right? So as a filmmaker, you know, you're competing this year, if you're theatrically with 800 films, but if you're creating new work, it means not only are you competing with those 50,000, but you have to compete with that 49,200 films that didn't get released last year, right? So that number keeps building. And then on top of that, we digitize our past at such a rapid rate that if you decided you were going to check out and stop with the present and only live in the past, 1968, you'd be able to live more thoroughly in 1968 than anyone could have in 1968, right? But as daunting as that feels, it brings a major change with it, right? That historically speaking, as a filmmaker, you always had to address the mass market, right? On one hand, in America, you know, you can say, we're free to make whatever we want. Yes, that's true to a degree, but we have no government support for the arts beyond tax breaks generally, and it means that you're always thinking about what sells, which is really kind of at the heart of the question, right? What sells? And when you think about that, that frequently means you're self-censoring. You're saying, like, I need to do something that might be against my creative instincts in order to have a work that will resonate with the public. I think that this movement from the mass market to recognizing grand abundance as a given actually gives us freedom now in a way we've never had, right? Because it really means that by using tools like the internet, like Fandor, like other things that are out there, we now can start to target audiences in a much different way. So for the first time in our cultural history, we're able to address the niches on a grand scale, right? So we can really think wide. But it means you have to work in a slightly different way than ever before. And I would say that when you look at the volume of work that comes to us, there's a few best practices that come from that, right? You want to be prolific. You want to be ubiquitous. It means you have to be radically collaborative in a different way than ever before, which probably means that you have to abandon the kind of authorship that has driven most cinema production, right? And work in a more collaborative fashion, radically collaborative. Not that you have to look at beyond that single monetizing event, otherwise known as the feature film, and start to think through how to deliver work on a consistent basis to different audiences on different platforms in a manner that will allow you to aggregate them, harvest them in some ways, get the data from them, figure out how to migrate them from one place to the other. It's not easy because you're not necessarily going to be capturing revenue every step of the way. But I think you start to then see that perhaps the creation of the film is not necessarily the monetizing event, or rather the distribution of the film, but other aspects of it are. The film business is only, for these 125 years, has been a single product business, right? We make one thing that we then repurpose on different platforms. On top of that, we make one thing that we think is disposable, right? Because that's the only answer that I have when I try to figure out, why do we only market films at the point of release, right? Running a digital platform now, I start to see there's an incredibly long tail that exists, but what we haven't done to make that work is plan, like we plan with our scripts, right? When you write a script, you think of your inciting incident and the moment of transformation and how the conflict, elevates and then resolves. We should do that for our films, too, across the lifespan that they're there. Constantly saying that with each new platform and I release my film on, I need to have an event around it, right? And then really I'm going to have to keep doing that for, the second year, the third year, and the fourth year of it. But if you start to do that, and we see this on the platform, you start to be the one that rises above all the noise, right? And you become something that has its own, cultural relevance because of that, I was really hesitant to go into social media. It felt antithetical to who I was. And through my own arrogance of proclaiming expertise and mastery in a certain area, I became recognized for mastery and expertise in a certain area. And that brought new opportunities to me. I could never have been running a tech platform, 5 years ago. But through really group learning and group lift, people coming together around the dialogue that I was leading, I learned, through other people in a place that would enable me to do what I'm doing now. And I think those steps of saying, okay, it's not just the movie, I've had the experience of making it. I have this frustration. I'm asking these questions. There's an audience for that. You're not alone in what you're saying. In fact, if you wrote a blog post for Hope for Film, I think about that exact question, that dilemma, I think people would start to find you for that. And I offer you that as an opportunity to do so. But don't just stop there. Figure out what are the next 6 blog posts that I can write. How can I get up to a higher platform than just Ted's blog, damn it. And then how do you start to make that work in a conversation that you can control? I was just reading, when I first got excited about it, it was kind of around Kevin Kelly's 1,000 true fans, right? Statement that was all you needed to have a self-directed life in a creative level. And I just saw a blog post yesterday about a writer in Taiwan that that said, despite the fact that that's over 10 years, he just validated that whole thing again. Like, he decided he was going to stop working for somebody else, work on a subscription level around what he was doing, thought he could maybe get to 500, but he actually succeeded, got to 1,000, and is self-supporting to that. You know, and I think it's, you just have to get off of the model that a movie was a feature film. I think it's much more than that, that you need to have traditional distribution and that you need to have stars to do that. Now, look at Joe Swanberg, right? Mm-hmm. Joe Swanberg certainly embraced being prolific, you know, was churning out 2 or 3 movies a year and has ghosts in the room. At, you know, 7 or 8 years into it, has now reached a level where he has folks like Anna Kendrick and Olivia Wilde and Joe Johnson coming to him to be in his movies, right? Where he's still making his movies for less than $1 million. You know, they're made in a cooperative fashion. And yes, now he has the stars that give him a bigger boost that let his movies come out theatrically. But he wasn't even chasing that. He was just saying, how am I going to be a generative, creative person for this next decade, right? And in that process, he found recognition and success. And I think the question really, instead of how do I get a movie star, do I need a movie star, really, what's holding you back from making your next film? And why does it just have to be a feature?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny too, because we actually came from working together doing a sketch comedy show for 3 years on the internet. So we were actually doing that in the sort of series way already. And then we both come from the Midwest, so we wanted to come out to Los Angeles to make movies. It was just this ingrained thing from our childhood, from coming from small towns and going to movies. So I think that's why we went that direction. I think now there's certain projects we have that we could actually take in multi-directions in the way that we originally started, essentially. So thank you. Thanks for that.
Good luck with it.
Thank you.
Come on, don't be bashful. There we go. In the center, the mic's coming. And the Ritual coffee is quite good. I know they're not a sponsor, but I have to say, even after it stops being hot, I'm still getting pleasure out of this.
My name's John Jeffcoat, and I'm director of Big in Japan, which is playing tonight, actually, if any of you are interested in seeing it. And I'm interested in distribution. My previous film, I'd spent on the festival circuit. It was a film called Outsourced, which then we actually adapted as a TV show for NBC. And it was an interesting process living on the festival circuit with other filmmakers whose films were being picked up by Sony Classics or IFC. And interesting to hear about them. You know, it'd be exciting for them to get their films picked up, but then finding later that they didn't make anything and they lost a lot of money. And that became a story that I'd heard over and over again. And so, we ended up on my other film turning down a deal with Miramax to independently release the film. And it was good in the sense that we were able to do the outsource deal, the TV deal, but it also meant like 2 years of my life promoting the movie and doing all that and doing all the legwork to get it out independently. Fast forward to now with this film that I've got, I'm really considering these new platforms like VHX and Gumroad. And well, I know I'm very curious to know if the doors are, what kind of things you're offering there. But this idea that you talk about, starting from say Kickstarter all the way to beyond standard distribution, is really exciting, and building your own fan base to hopefully break out into new things. But I'm curious to what you think about some of these other. Obviously there's a conflict of interest, I suppose, with Fandor, but what do you offer something for independent filmmakers, or versus what someone like a VHX or a Gumroad might offer?
The reason I'm running one of these platforms now is because I'm incredibly excited by the opportunity that all of them have. And if you follow my blog and you go back to really the process that has kind of brought me here, you'll see the enthusiasm and hopes and sometimes negative thoughts too that I've had, going through all of it. It's really freeing, right? That we now have, like 4 or 5 years ago, I was hired by the EU to do something on opportunity here in America, and I literally built out a list that had 27 different types of platforms and a total of something like 135 companies that you had access without having money, to have digital distribution occur. And that, is overwhelming, but also very freeing. And I think, I was on a panel in Vancouver yesterday, and we were talking, and one of the things that struck me, like, someone was saying, like, man, when I first started, all I had to do was, find the money and deliver the movie. And now I have to be my marketer, my social media person, run a Kickstarter campaign or Indiegogo, and, all of those challenges. And my response to that is, yeah, isn't that great? Because you can. Right? Now, it might be overwhelming. We may not have the skill set to do all of those things, but the fact is we have the opportunity to do that, and you can amass, a team to help you with that. And that's a big difference now that we have all of those things. And it does, like every week, something new comes along. It keeps getting better, right? Is there noted best practices? A little bit, but not everything that we need along the way. One of the reasons I get so bullish about SVOD in particular, and it's only a piece, you still need the TVOD, SVOD being subscription video on demand, TVOD being transactional video on demand, that being those companies like Gumroad and VHX that you mentioned, and AVOD being advertising, ad-supported video on demand like Snag or Crackle. Those kind of the core, and then that's online, OTT over the top, and then there's cable supported too. When I've always, loved the phrase, we were promised jetpacks, right? I was really excited at age 12 that I would have that Dick Tracy wrist-wearing computer, finally. And well, damn it, we got that, right? But we didn't get the jetpack, right, yet. But it's a little similar to me when I start thinking about the internet, right? The first wave of the internet promised that we would have access to everything, right? Then, Jesse Eisenberg or whatever his name came along and invented Web 2.0, and we got promised that we would have access to everybody, right? But we actually haven't seen those two things fully married yet, right? That's the missing jetpack, right? Where you look right now, it's either consumption or community. We don't yet marry those things. And I think that the great way, at least for films that aim to have a transformative power, aim to reach higher, aim to be part of an ongoing dialogue of cinema history, that you need to have something that connects community with consumption, that allows for a level of discovery, which is what SVOD, I think, does. It's a all-you-can-eat buffet for one price. More importantly, however, is that it allows for a network effect to occur for the individual filmmaker, for people to come together and capitalize on each other's success, particularly if it's designed to have a level of openness to it for those that participate. And that's what we're doing with Fandor. We're built to make sure that it's not just the commodifying of entertainment, right? Which is what I think you see on Netflix, Amazon, iTunes. It's really just the world of entertainment, and we lose that distinction, which is, I feel, the building block of culture, which is the promotion of title and artist, right? And you want that still to be, I think, right, the kind of core thing of why you want to consume and connect is through that dialogue. It's one of the reasons that, although I think transactional is an important piece of the chain, I think about it a little bit differently, because I think an individual filmmaker is going to have a really hard time bringing people to their site, right, to have someone engage in a title or conversation with you as an artist, right? You're going to be served much better in a place where that dialogue can be had, right? right? Now, transactional, however, has a very unique attribute, is that it immediately gets somebody's credit card out. If you're going to be driven to see big in Japan, you're going to go there and you're going to be ready to type in your number, right? Which is great, because it could lead you to engage through your wallet in other sorts of ways, too. I think that you start to recognize that in this era that everything requires a custom fit, right? And it also requires experimentation, and not everything is going to be successful. And you need to be willing to share those lessons with other people, right? And we're still devoid of having access to group learning, despite how much it's being needed. I would have thought that all of the film organizations would have these huge databases to help the films that participate, and I couldn't find that. I would say Film Independent probably has the best case study list, but I built one myself that if you, it's not particularly well organized, but if you go on Hope for Film and you do case study distribution master list, I think we have like 70 up there now, and you'll see different things that work for different people. I'm a huge believer in theatrical. I have to say that I think that you need to get that pop to cut through that noise. Now you have to weigh it really carefully to see, how you don't overspend, in doing so. But there are definitely ways you can do it. You don't need to be opening in 15 markets simultaneously, 5, many films benefit simply by a New York opening because of the New York Times review. On the other hand, you're going to be opening frequently with over 25 other films, and no one's going to see that movie, and that's going to affect your per-screen average, which is going to affect your ability to book it elsewhere. So you have to take that into account, too. Outsource definitely, was on my radar. Like I kept seeing it, I was very curious about it. I did not get around to see it. I would love to see it. I'd love to see your new movie, But I think instead of, what it already sounds to me like what you're doing, you're not even thinking of your single film, which is bravo, right? You want to be thinking about how to keep making movies, how to build upon those. And the more you retain those rights of those films yourself, the more you're able to use your prior work to incentivize the next work. One of the things we just started doing on Fandor is doing different forms of fulfillment for our direct relationships with filmmakers. We have a program called Fix, which we have over 100 direct relationships with filmmakers. And we've done 5 experiments on crowdfunding platforms where we use either their back catalog for instant fulfillment. You give $5, you can access those. We give subscriptions, that we donate, to use in those campaigns. And those 5 films all exceeded their goals, and I don't know if it's just because of us, but I'm sure we helped along the way. And one of the things that becomes clear that, as your job description as a creator expands to include the business side of it, as you become a artist entrepreneur, you better find great partners along the way that are vested in your success and that you can use in different ways to build it. And sometimes that's other filmmakers, sometimes it's platforms and distributors. But I think there's so much headway that we can do, and I really believe that, culture is advanced, quickest from those that haven't yet spoken, right? That you want to have new voices and outsiders is one of the things that drove me to say, like, what? I know I can make great movies, but I actually think I can do more good by doing this right now. So, okay, I think one more? All right, quickly. And this one will be my short answer.
For someone that's brand new in this territory, do you have any advice, maybe how to avoid the liars, cheats, egotistical narcissists, and outright misanthropes?
You're not going to avoid them.
Or how to spot them.
But you're going to be able to let them do real harm, right? I've been cheated, right? I've had to maintain relationships with the people that have cheated me. more importantly, I've had to make sure that their bad ways do not influence my, good intentions, and I think that's really the key. There's a price for learning, right? I, early on, worked with a sales agent named Krista Soretti, right? Right when she helped us on the wedding banquet, because we didn't, we did all those deals. We didn't even think through we have to now deliver and fulfill those contracts and the amount of work. And like as that was kicking in for us, she came to us and said, "Let me help you." She was someone that really deserves credit for Aki Kaurismäki, Michael Haneke, Ang and Hal, many other directors. She did not use contracts, right, for the distributors. It was a slightly different era, but her opinion was, look, you can fuck me once, right, and I'll never do business with you again. That was it. And it's just like, I've got too much to do to bother with 3 months of negotiation. This is a deal. This is what I'll provide. It's for this long, and behave well. Now, she ultimately, about 3 years later, left the business because you can no longer operate that way. But I think there's some real truth to that. It's inevitable. You're going to meet some bad people, right? Don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. Find the good people that you can talk to, the other filmmakers who will be going through the same thing. Compare notes. One of the jury members up here is Christine Vachon, right? Christine has surpassed me in the number of films that I've made. We started exactly the same time. We used to compete for jobs together, right? Compete for directors as we both became producers, and collaborate, quite a bit. There were periods when we would call each other every day and basically share notes on what was working, what wasn't working, right? We found a way to really lift each other up. And that person for you is probably in the room right now, right? Like somebody else who's in exactly the same way. And it may take a while, right, for you to find that relationship, but you'll find people that will help you. So as opposed to, the answer to that is, don't worry about the folks on that side. Find the people that you really want to keep close to you and do everything to keep those close to you and engage with you. So. All right, well, thank you all. I'll be outside. If you'd like to buy a book, I've got some to sell over there. And thanks for coming, and thanks to Napa Valley Film Festival for having us all.